Last month, a buddy brought his bike to my garage with a mysterious knock in the engine. $1,500 later, the mechanic found metal shavings in the oil and scored cylinder walls. The kicker? This wasn't some freak accident or manufacturing defect. It was completely preventable. Just one bad habit he'd been doing every morning for 2 years. Here's the truth most riders don't want to hear. Those mystery failures that drain your bank account aren't mysteries at all. They're the result of 10 deadly habits that silently destroy your engine, drivetrain, tires, and electronics while you ride. And two of these habits are so obvious that mechanics spot them instantly, and used bike buyers use them to slash thousands off your asking price. Today, we're breaking down all 10 habits that'll kill your motorcycle. No theory, no fluff. Just the specific things you're probably doing right now that are shortening your bike's life and setting you up for catastrophic failures. Let's start with the engine killers, because these are the expensive ones. Habit number one is cold start revving. You fire up your bike and immediately twist the throttle to warm it up faster, or just because it sounds good. But here's what's actually happening inside that engine. When metal is cold, it contracts. Your pistons, rings, and cylinder walls have specific clearances that only work properly at operating temperature. When you rev a cold engine, you're forcing those tight tolerances to handle combustion pressures they're not ready for. The oil hasn't reached all the bearing surfaces yet, so you're running metal on metal for those first few seconds. You're also forcing cold, thick oil through passages that need thin, hot oil to flow properly. This destroys rod bearings, scores cylinder walls, and glazes the bore surface so your rings can't seal properly. The result? Low compression, oil consumption, and eventually a complete rebuild. The fix is simple. Start it, let it idle for 30 seconds, then ride gently until the temp gauge moves. Don't sit there revving. Don't blast off immediately. Just normal, easy riding until everything reaches temperature. Habit number two is using the wrong oil. Most riders think oil is oil, but motorcycle engines are completely different from car engines. Car oil contains friction modifiers that make it slippery between metal surfaces. That's great for a car engine, but deadly for a motorcycle wet clutch. Those friction modifiers make your clutch plates slip, overheat, and glaze over. You need oil that meets JSO-MA or MA2 specifications. These oils are formulated without the friction modifiers that kill wet clutches. Even if the viscosity looks right, car oil will destroy your clutch pack in a few thousand miles. And here's the expensive part. Once those clutch plates are glazed, you can't just change the oil and fix it. You need a complete clutch replacement. Check your manual for the exact JSO spec and stick to motorcycle-specific oils. Yes, they cost more, but a clutch job costs way more. Habit number three is chain neglect. Your chain connects engine power to the rear wheel, but most riders treat it like it's bulletproof. A loose chain slaps against the swing arm, stretches the links, and hammers your sprocket teeth into sharp hooks. A tight chain binds up, loads your output shaft bearings, and can lock up your rear wheel if it seizes. But the real killer is lubrication. A dry chain acts like a file, wearing away sprocket teeth and stretching links until the whole system falls apart. I've seen riders strand themselves when a neglected chain snapped at highway speed, locking the rear wheel and sending them into a slide. Check tension every 500 miles. Clean and lube after every wet or dusty ride. And alignment matters too. A misaligned chain wears the sides of your sprocket teeth and creates heat that breaks down the chain's internal lubricant. Habit number four is clutch abuse. Riding the clutch to smooth out shifts creates heat that warps steel plates and glazes friction surfaces. Once they're glazed, they slip even more, creating more heat in a downward spiral toward complete failure. Holding the clutch lever at long red lights keeps constant pressure on your cable or hydraulic system, wearing out springs and release mechanisms. For stops longer than 30 seconds, click into neutral and give your left hand a break. The worst habit is using the clutch to control speed in parking lots or slow traffic. That friction zone generates massive heat with no airflow to cool it. Use your rear brake for speed control and only slip the clutch when you actually need to modulate power. Once you nail these engine basics, everything else clicks. But the parts that carry that work to the ground need protection too. Now let's talk about the parts that keep you connected to the road because these habits will eat your bike from the ground up. Habit number 5 is tire pressure neglect. Those two contact patches under you are the only things keeping you alive. But most riders check their pressure about as often as they clean their garage. When your tires are underinflated, they flex too much, building heat that literally cooks the rubber from the inside out. That heat deforms the tire carcass, creates flat spots, and eventually leads to catastrophic failure at speed. Underinflated tires also create scalloping, those weird wear patterns that make your bike shake and wobble. Once scalloping starts, it gets worse fast because the uneven contact patch amplifies the problem. On the flip side, overinflated tires shrink your contact patch, reduce grip, and make the bike feel twitchy and unpredictable in corners. Here's what most riders don't realize. Even a few PSI off specification changes everything about how your bike handles. Your cornering clearance shifts, your braking distances increase, and your suspension can't do its job properly because the tire isn't absorbing road impacts correctly. Check pressure when the tires are cold, at least once a week. Keep a digital gauge in your toolkit and learn what proper pressure feels like when you're riding. Your bike will handle better, your tires will last longer, and you won't be setting yourself up for a blowout. Habit number 6 is relying on just one brake. Your bike has two brakes because they work as a system, not individual components. Riders who grab only the front brake dive the suspension, transfer too much weight forward, and risk locking up the front wheel. That's an instant crash at any speed above walking pace. But rear brake only riders aren't much better. They skid the rear wheel, create flat spots on the tire, and take forever to actually stop. Worse, they're not using 70% of their available stopping power, which means longer stopping distances and more panic situations. The real damage happens to your brake components. Overusing one brake creates hot spots on the rotors from uneven heating. Those hot spots warp the rotor surface, creating pulsing in the lever and uneven pad wear. Eventually, you'll need new rotors, pads, and possibly calipers from the excessive heat cycling. Practice progressive braking with both systems. Start with light pressure on both, then increase gradually. The front does most of the work, but the rear keeps the bike stable and adds that extra stopping power when you need it most. Habit number 7 is pressure washing your bike. It looks clean and shiny afterward, but you're forcing high-pressure water past seals that were never designed to handle that kind of abuse. Water gets into wheel bearings, swing arm pivots, steering head bearings, and electrical connections. Once water gets into a sealed bearing, it displaces the grease and starts corrosion. Those bearings will develop play, create vibration, and eventually fail completely. I've seen riders destroy $200 wheel bearings trying to save 10 minutes with a pressure washer. The electrical damage is even worse. Water forced into connectors creates corrosion that causes voltage drops, intermittent failures, and ghost codes that drive you crazy trying to diagnose. Modern bikes have dozens of sensitive electronic components that don't appreciate surprise showers. Use a regular garden hose, soft brush, and motorcycle-specific cleaners. Take your time and do it right. Your bearings, electronics, and wallet will thank you. Habit number 8 is suspension neglect. Your suspension isn't just about comfort, it's about keeping your tires in contact with the road. When your sag is wrong, you're either pounding your suspension bushings into dust or overwhelming your head bearings with forces they can't handle. Too little sag means your suspension can't absorb impacts, so every bump gets transferred directly to the frame, bushings, and bearings. Too much sag means you're riding on the bump stops, which weren't designed for constant use. Wrong sag also affects your bike's geometry. Your head angle changes, your trail changes, and suddenly your bike develops a weave at highway speeds or feels unstable in corners. Most riders blame the tire or think something's loose, but it's actually the suspension not doing its job. Set your sag properly and check it monthly. Your bike will handle better, your components will last longer, and you'll actually enjoy the ride instead of fighting the machine. With rolling gear sorted, the last category burns resale faster than anything. Fuel, wiring, and owner habits that scream, "Avoid this bike," to anyone who knows what to look for. Habit number 9 is living on reserve. You know the drill. That fuel light comes on, and you think, "I'll get gas tomorrow," or I can make it another 50 miles. But here's what happens inside your tank when you constantly run it low. The fuel acts as a coolant for your fuel pump, keeping it from overheating. When you're always on fumes, that pump runs hot and dies early. A fuel pump replacement? That's $300 to $500 you didn't need to spend. Worse is what happens to the tank itself. When fuel levels drop, the empty space fills with humid air. That moisture condenses on the tank walls, creating rust that flakes off and gets pulled into your fuel system. Those rust particles clog injectors, score fuel pump internals, and create lean conditions that can burn holes in pistons. The sediment that settles in every tank gets stirred up when you're running low, so your fuel filter and injectors get hammered with debris that normally sits harmlessly at the bottom. Keep your tank at least quarter full, and your fuel system will run clean for years instead of months. But fuel isn't the only system riders abuse through lazy habits. Using your kill switch for daily shutdowns is another resale killer. That switch is designed for emergencies, not routine use. The contacts aren't built for constant cycling, so they develop resistance, create heat, and eventually fail. When a buyer sees a kill switch that's loose, sticky, or doesn't make solid contact, they know you've been using it wrong. More importantly, kill switch dependency creates dangerous muscle memory. In a real emergency, you need to hit that switch instantly without thinking. If you use it every day, your brain treats it as routine instead of emergency procedure. Use your ignition key for normal shutdowns and save the kill switch for actual emergencies. The most expensive habit is ignoring small sounds and vibrations. That little tick from the valve train, the slight vibration through the handlebars, the clutch that's starting to slip just a bit. These are your bike talking to you. Ignore these early warnings and tiny problems become expensive failures. A slight valve tick becomes bent valves and damaged pistons when the clearance goes too tight. A small vibration in the handlebars becomes a complete front-end rebuild when worn head bearings start hammering their races. That clutch slip becomes a complete clutch replacement when you keep riding it instead of adjusting the cable. Here's what mechanics and used bike buyers look for instantly. Evidence that the owner ignored maintenance warnings. Worn control cables that should have been replaced months ago. Chain and sprockets that are completely shot. Brake pads worn to the backing plates. These aren't wear items anymore. They're red flags that scream this owner doesn't maintain anything. The final habit that kills resale value is thinking you're done learning. Riders who figured it out years ago and never updated their technique are hard on equipment. They over-rev because they never learn proper shifting points. They brake late and hard because they never practice smooth stops. They corner poorly and blame the bike when it's really their technique putting stress on components that shouldn't be stressed. Fresh riders often treat their bikes better than experienced ones because they're still paying attention. They're gentle with controls, careful with maintenance, and respectful of the machine. Veterans sometimes get sloppy, and that sloppiness shows up in worn-out bikes that should have years left in them. Stay curious about better technique. Take refresher courses. Watch how smooth riders handle their controls. The bike responds to your inputs, and better inputs mean longer component life. Catastrophic failures start as controllable tiny habits. Use this checklist this week, then watch our chain care and braking deep dive next. Subscribe for no BS maintenance that protects your wallet and keeps your ride strong.